My college roommate kept a dark secret. Written by Jiggle Physics. When I was in college, I lived in a modest apartment just out of town. Given that I was trying to put myself through college, I had to save as much money as I could on rent. So I moved in with two other roommates who were attending the same university I was. It had 3 bedrooms, which I was thankful for. I really didn't want to be subjected to anyone's nighttime snoring or anything else a college kid would get up to at night. Colin was a finance major, had ginger hair, and enjoyed playing 2K into all hours of the night. He'd wasted no time setting up his PlayStation in the living room before even unpacking any of his stuff. Ken was in his sophomore year, studying linguistics. He was a quiet guy, kept to himself mostly. Only ever came out of his room to go to classes or pour himself a bowl of cereal. Most of the time, though, he was just out of the apartment. And then there was me, Tyler. I was studying psychology with the vague goal of working in academia to carry out important research. I was sure I would figure the specifics out along the way. Colin and I had managed to get Ken to join us for drinks a couple of times. Even got him out to a house party once. Whatever his scene was, partying certainly was not it. While Colin was knocking them back with the best of them, Ken was conservatively nursing a Bud Light, grimacing at every sip. I kind of felt sorry for the guy. I guess he had his own circle of friends, since he was always out of the house so much. I certainly hadn't seen or met any of them, though. Ken could be very reserved and standoffish a lot of the time. Even when talking to him, he could be very distant, as if his mind was in some far-off place. If you didn't know the guy, you might even think he was a bit of a dick. He really wasn't, though. All 3 of us got along pretty well. No roommate spats or drama like some of my other friends on campus would lament about. I was tutoring high school math alongside college, so I was happy that my roommates didn't add an extra level of stress on top of that. After about 1.5 years of living together, Ken died. A car accident, we were told. Ken was, apparently, taking a cab out of the city late one night when a drunk driver veered out of the oncoming lane and crashed into them. Head-on collision. Ken and the cab driver had died instantly. Ken had been sitting in the front passenger seat, according to the police report. The drunk driver succumbed to his injuries in the hospital some 12 hours later. I found out about the accident when I answered a phone call from a sniffling Colin the morning after the crash. It was obvious that he had been crying on the other end of the line. I wasn't as affected by Ken's death. Don't get me wrong, I liked the guy and I was sad, but it's not like we were all that close. Plus, I suppose I'm more one to bottle up my feelings when it comes to grief. Ken's parents arrived the following week to clear out his stuff. His father introduced himself with a stoic, while somewhat pained, delivery. I had met Ken's mother only once before when she helped him move in. Today, she seemed a much smaller woman, as if beaten down by the world, obvious bereavement behind her eyes. When they opened the door to his room, Ken's mom became hysterical. Deep, wallowing sobs echoed as she cupped her face. Colin suggested that he and I pack up Ken's belongings to make it easier on the grieving parents. They would only have to take the boxes and leave. About 10 minutes into packing, Ken's father joined us. Every now and then we could hear soft whimpers coming from the other room. Almost done packing, we had gotten everything into a box and into the moving van, except Ken's computer. We tried stowing the ultra-wide monitor earlier, but we just couldn't find a box big enough.
You guys can keep that,
said Ken's dad, nodding over to the computer monitor. Colin and I looked at each other awkwardly.
Oh no, Mr. McTravis,
Colin began to say.
We couldn't possibly. It's fine, really. We have no use for it anyway,
Mr. McTravis stated flatly, staring out of Ken's bedroom window. We escorted the McTravises to their U-Haul, watched them pull out onto the road, and drive off. So what do you want to do with the computer? I asked Colin when we got back inside.
I guess we could sell it,
Colin shrugged.
I really don't feel comfortable holding on to the thing.
Same, I agreed. Colin and I were both apprehensive about going into Ken's computer to wipe the hard drive, so we tossed a coin to see who would have to do it. I lost. Now, I've never claimed I could hack into the Pentagon or anything, but I was pretty sure I could figure out how to wipe a hard drive. When I tried to, however, an error message came up. This action could not be performed because the following program or folder is currently open. Taxi Vipers. I was puzzled. There were no folders or applications open, much less one called Taxi Vipers. Again, I'm not the most tech-savvy person out there, so I went to get Colin. Colin did exactly what I did and was met with the same error message. He then opened up Task Manager, unable to find any program by that name that was running. He fiddled with a few more tabs and menus for a while, but that also bore no fruit. Finally, he did a search on the C drive for the term Taxi Vipers. A folder came up. Wait, don't open it, I said, not wanting to invade our dead roommate's privacy like that. Just delete the folder or something. Colin nodded understandingly. He went to delete the folder, but an error message came up again. This action could not be performed because the following program or folder is currently open. Taxi Vipers.
God damn it, Colin swore. How the fuck is it open?
So what now? I asked cluelessly.
Thinking.
Colin tapped his finger on Ken's study desk. Then he opened the folder. There were 5 video files in the folder, each titled with 6-digit numbers. Colin looked over at me, wondering what to do next. I don't want to see the guy's porn or whatever it is, man, I stated, not even joking.
Look, me neither, okay?
Colin assured me.
But something in this folder is either corrupted or glitched or... I don't know. If we can open a couple of files, we might find the one that's causing the issue,
he said, hovering the cursor over the video file at the top of the page. I didn't like it, but I guess he had a point. He took my silence as confirmation and clicked on the video. The video opened up a grainy feed. A young woman was sitting by a table in what looked like one of those interrogation rooms you'd see in a cop show. The woman had long brown hair and was probably around my age. The walls were painted white, and you could see a fraction of a gray door behind her just in the corner of the camera's view. The door opened and a man walked in. His face was out of frame, but he was wearing a white lab coat. He moved out of frame, but the woman's gaze followed him. When the man stopped moving, the woman was looking into the camera, indicating that the man was standing right behind it. The woman looked uneasy, but not scared. Moments later, another man walked in, also wearing a lab coat. He was holding a clipboard. He sat in the chair across the table from the woman and placed the clipboard down. Colin and I turned away from the screen to look at each other in shock. The man with the clipboard, it was Ken. His hair was shorter, but it was definitely him. "Good morning, madam," said the voice from behind the camera. "I am Dr. Fisher. For the recording, please state your name." His tone was cold and clinical. Madeline Parker," the woman said warily. While the woman spoke, Ken started writing on a page in the clipboard. "Tell me, madam," Dr. Fisher asked, "do you believe in the paranormal?" "Yes," Madeline said, her fingertips tapping on the table nervously. Ken stood up and walked over to the woman's direction, then past her, out of frame. He reappeared shortly, dragging cables and a large machine on wheels. The sound was muffled, but you could hear Ken speaking to Madeline, and she began unbuttoning the top half of her blouse. Ken grabbed a few of the cables and placed 2 electrodes on her chest. He then connected the cables to the machine and turned it on. The display on the machine lit up, followed by a periodic beeping sound.
"A heart rate monitor,"
Colin observed, never looking away from the computer screen. The camera lens made the light from the display flicker. On Madeline's head, Ken placed a cap. More than a dozen cables were extending from it.
"Now, Miss Madeline,"
Fisher said,
"do we have your permission to administer the test?"
Madeline nodded.
"For the recording, please, Miss Madeline,"
the voice of the doctor insisted. "Yes, you have my permission," Madeline stammered.
"Beginning sonic exposure examination," Dr. Fisher announced.
Ken retrieved a pair of large headphones and placed them over Madeline's ears, then walked back over to his side of the table. After a few seconds, Fisher spoke again.
"Increased heart rate. Subject condition remains stable,"
he remarked. Ken scribbled in his clipboard. The beeping sound from the heart rate monitor was noticeably accelerating in pace. Every so often, Ken would read the monitor and then write something down. Then Madeline let out a haunting shriek. "Stop! Make it stop!" she cried. She was trying to get up from her chair, but her movement was impaired somehow. Ken rose quickly to get to Madeline, but the doctor spoke first.
"No, Kenneth,"
Dr. Fisher commanded.
"She has already agreed to the study."
Ken sat down obediently. Madeline's screams became louder and louder. Her fingers dug into the armrests of her chair. "Make it stop! Make it stop!" she pleaded over and over. Then she suddenly went quiet. Her breathing was heavy, and you could see her chest expand and flatten rapidly. "No! No, please! No! 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 No!" She began to blare again. She started writhing in her chair, then violently thrashing her arms and legs about, kicking off one of her heels. She managed to jolt herself out of her chair, ripping the cables out of the monitor, hitting the ground with a sickening thud. Madeline wasn't moving. Ken looked up at the camera, up at the doctor.
"Get over here!"
Fisher shouted. Ken ran over to Madeline and crouched down, and that's where the video ended. "Jesus Christ!" Colin said, making me aware of his presence again. "That girl! Fuck! Do you think she—" He couldn't finish the question. I dragged my palm down my face. I didn't know what to make any of this. The girl, what were they doing to her? Who was this mysterious doctor? Why on earth was Ken involved? My head was spinning. Madeline's screams still fresh in my mind. I could sense her fear. No, I could understand her fear. A primal response brought on by something truly immeasurable in horror. But what? And that revolting sound of her face cracking onto the cold tiles. I felt warm bile rise in the back of my throat. The room around me twisted and gyrated. Involuntarily, I leaned over and spewed vomit all over Ken's carpet. Colin led me to the bathroom and hunched me over the toilet. More vomit came. I got in the shower, the cold water zapping me back into a state of quasi-lucidity. I held my face under the water, hoping it would wash away everything I had just experienced. Every time I closed my eyes, the images would come back. Her screams would resonate around my skull with stark clarity, as if I were in that godforsaken chamber of terror. Colin was on his laptop in the kitchen when I came out of the bathroom.
I figured it out,
he said, not even looking up at me.
Ken was taking linguistics, right?
I didn't say anything.
Taxi Vipers, Colin said. It's an anagram of experiment.
I shook my head obliviously.
That's Latin for ghost,
he stated, looking at me now. I shuddered, remembering the doctor's question in the video.
Tell me, Madeline, do you believe in the paranormal?
Oh shit, Colin whispered, almost inaudibly.
I've emailed myself the videos,
Colin said, staring down into his lap. I was in disbelief. You what? I was stuttering. Why the fuck would...
Tyler, I want to get to the bottom of this. Ken was our friend, and if these videos or that doctor guy has anything to do with his... He paused for a moment. With his death, then we have to find answers.
Colin was on his feet now, alive with vigor and purpose. I knew what he meant. I knew what we had to do. I didn't want to see another one of those videos ever again. I wanted to purge the memory from my psyche. I was petrified. Where Colin saw answers, I saw fear. He eyed me expectantly. I hung my head, silently walking over to the kitchen table, and sat myself down next to Colin. Without saying anything, he clicked on another video. The video opened up on the same white-walled room. A burly man walked in, escorted by Ken, who was again wearing a lab coat. They were speaking to each other, but the audio wasn't clear. The man seated himself in the same chair that Madeline had in the first video. Ken sat down across from him. The doctor from the previous video didn't seem to be in the room. For the recording, can you please state your name? Ken asked the man, enunciating his words.
Philip Jones,
replied the man, folding his arms as he leaned back in his chair. Tell me, Philip, do you believe in the paranormal? Ken asked coldly. An icy tingle ran down my spine.
Ha! Hell no!
Philip replied brazenly, laughing almost. Ken got up and began outfitting the man in the same way he had done before, asphyxiating cables to his chest and head. There was one extra step that he performed, though, one he hadn't done with Madeline. Ken fastened leather straps around Philip's wrists and ankles, belting him to the chair. Philip didn't really seem concerned by this. Ken placed the large headphones over Philip's head, then retreated to his side of the table again. Mr. Jones, Ken said, looking down at his clipboard. Do I have your permission to begin the study?
Yup,
Philip replied gruffly.
Beginning sonic exposure exam now, Ken said for the recording. I fidgeted with my hands nervously. I looked over at Colin. His eyes were locked to the screen.
What the fuck?
Philip cried after a few moments, jerking his shoulders.
You motherfucker! Get me out of this thing!
Then he began screaming, spittle flying from his mouth.
I'm gonna kill you! Get me out!
The man continued to bellow in desperation. Ken was deaf to his pleas, jotting down readings from the monitor calmly. Philip's screams became too much for me to bear. My mind was oversaturated with his agony. Just as I was about to tell Colin to stop the video, the feed cut out. Colin and I sat in silence for a moment, seeing our haunted reflections in the black screen, and then a high-pitched, eardrum-rupturing static noise began emanating from the laptop speakers. Colin turned the volume down, but the noise persisted. My vision became blurry. I felt paralyzed in my chair. And then I saw it. Death. Grotesque images darted into my field of vision. I saw executions, mutilated corpses, dismemberments, beheadings, people being tortured. A soldier screamed in mind-shattering pain, his legs eviscerated into a mist of bone dust and gore. A woman trapped in a house fire wailed as blood-orange flames licked up at her body and attacked her, searing her skin first red and then a putrid black. Thousands upon thousands of these experiences were presented into my brain concurrently, and for each of them, I was there with these people. No, I was these people. I experienced their suffering, overwhelming suffering, impossible to describe in words. The collective misery and trauma of every single being that had ever existed, all playing out in my mind. I was crying. I fought through the images and saw Colin on his knees, his fists squeezing into his temples. Weakened, he tried clicking off of the video, but the screen was unresponsive. He held the power button down, but the static continued. Colin fell to the floor and put his face in his hands, sobbing loudly. The static intensified, turning into an otherworldly cacophony of bells and beeps. The haunting images grew more vivid. In the corners of my vision, I could see nearly formless, dark figures. They were looking at me. They wanted something from me. I knew this. I didn't have anything to give them. Somehow, I was able to communicate this to them. Then I understood. They wanted me to go with them, to follow them to where suffering is not a concept. They were right. I knew they were right. I could transcend the trivial existence of humanity's limited reality and exist in a plane my mind wasn't yet ready to conceptualize. But I would know soon. I would know it all. I had to go with them. I asked them how. They would guide me. I understood. I was overcome with elation, weeping tears of joy, knowing what was about to happen to me. And then they began moving away from me. No, I thought. Don't leave me. I begged and pleaded until they were gone. I realized that the sound had stopped, the haunting images along with it. Colin had managed to rip the battery out of his laptop, finally ending it all. The real world came back rapidly. Soon I would forget all about the dark figures and the plane beyond human comprehension, as if it were all just a dream. A dark, twisted, beautiful dream. Colin was in the fetal position. His deafening screams had turned into soft whimpers. I helped him up into a chair. We sat in complete silence, neither of us wanting to acknowledge what had taken place. And then, I swear, while the battery was disconnected, the laptop's screen turned on. I wanted to grab it and throw it out the window, but all the strength had been drained out of me. A video began playing. Ken looked into the camera. He looked ghastly. His skin was pale and cracked. His eyes were sunken in. Black rings encircled them. He hardly moved, just staring at the camera with a flat, unwavering expression. It's impossible to say how long he stared. Minutes? Hours? He stood there, just peering through the lens. Then Ken began to speak.
Tell me, Tyler and Colin.
The voice was rough and almost unrecognizable.
Do you believe in the paranormal?